Hey everyone, Graeldon here. I want to apologise that this video has taken so long to come out and that it's probably a much shorter duration than you were expecting. We were ambitious with .hack Part 1, creating the longest video on the channel so far. Unfortunately, the problems were twofold. It took much longer and was much more difficult to make, and it was also just not great. As many of you pointed out, it was too much of a plot recap and not focused enough as a review. And I think you're right. We actually nearly finished the video, but burned out along the way, hence why we switched to the side quest content temporarily. But we've now adapted the video to the channel's usual style, so I want to thank you for your patience and for your continued support, and I hope that you enjoyed today's video. An online game where being killed by the wrong player could send you into a real-life coma. Guild politics, shaky alliances, and betrayals. A rogue AI that is blurring the lines between the real and digital worlds. A mission to uncover the truth. And at the heart of it all, there's this jerk. Welcome back to the world. My name is Graeldon, and I'm reviewing Steam games in alphabetical order to find the hidden gems among the piles of garbage, and today we're reviewing the second game from .hack//GU last recode, .hack//GU Reminisce. Let's begin. Welcome to the second part of the .hack GU last recode review. It's been over a month since part 1 release, so let's do a quick recap to set the scene. Sasuke Haseo, dived into a VR MMORPG called The World and made some friends, but then his in-game girlfriend, who was totally real but they go to another school and that's why you've never met them, was put into a coma when she was PK'd, and then Haseo's character was reset when trying to avenge her. On a quest for revenge, he awakened a special power only given to 8 players, called an avatar, and his is called Skaith. Fighting his way through the standard anime tournament arc, he slowly begins to make new friends. Pai, a scantily clad and highly intelligent hand-to-hand fighter, Kun, a bayonet-wielding ladies' man, Syllabus, the leader of a noob-friendly guild, Gaspard, a lovely, bumbling mage, and Atali, a healer who is wearing the skin of Haseo's comatose girlfriend. Haseo is able to defeat the bad guy and discovers a plot involving a powerful AI called Ida. Chasing his girlfriend's killer, a player called Tri-Edge, Haseo and friends go out of bounds, defeat Tri-Edge in a largely underwhelming battle, and then Atali is impaled by Ida. Roll credits. Following so far? It's okay if you're not, the .hack games do manage to basically squeeze an entire season's worth of anime into each game, which is why I said last time that it's best to consider these games as an anime first and a game second. Part 2 of this trilogy in a bit, .hack GU Reminisce picks up right where the first game left off, Atali's death scene. Or rather not. Within the first hour or so of the game, we learn that Atali isn't dead, just physically and emotionally injured, that there is a plot requiring all 8 of the avatar-wielding players, and that they all manage to escape an AI-cloned version of the game world that they were stuck in, much like Sword Art Online. I appreciate that the game actually doesn't let you log out during this section of the game, it's a neat touch. Loose ends tidied up, the general premise of .hack Reminisce is that Haseo is trying to recruit the remaining avatar players to his side while fending off the growing Ida threat and investigating Ida-infected players. This, of course, requires another tournament arc. How original. So, what is different between part 1 and part 2 of this trilogy? Well, not a lot, but also quite a bit in the areas that matter. At first glance, you'd be forgiven for thinking that nothing has changed, as the games did release less than a year apart, and as such have reused the vast majority of in-game assets. It should be mentioned that the music continues to be lovely. I don't think there's really a single track that misses the mark, not even some of the more humorous sounding ones. Sadly though, as before, many of these tracks will result in copyright strikes, so I'm limited with what I can use during the video. Some of the biggest issues in part 1 were related to the repetition of the environments, how the combat was basically a button mashing affair outside of the arena battles, and the lack of any real rewards. The good news is that I can say that most of these issues are fixed in part 2, although not all of them immediately. We're introduced to one of the changes pretty early on, a brand new environment to explore when adventuring into areas, the canyon. Aside from being visually different, these areas are also much more expansive, giving additional reason to use the steam bike to get around. Speaking of the Steam bike, it handles much better in this game, and there's a new upgrade system to enhance various aspects of the bike, and there are even bike-specific missions to undertake. These are given out by a duck-like NPC who apparently has no eyes. No, really, you can see right through his head. I don't think this was meant to happen. Anyway, back to the new areas. The game makes it pretty obvious right away that it's changing up the formula. Not only will you now sometimes need to defeat other players instead of monsters, but the groups of static enemies waiting to be ambushed are gone, and enemies will now roam around the area instead, forcing you to plan your approach slightly more tactfully than before. I say slightly because you can still just wait for enemies to turn around and then attack their backs. Works every time. So, we've got a new area to quest in. What else? How about a new town hub to explore? Once you've finished the intro of part 2, you'll gain access to a new town called Graeldon. However, in true MMORPG fashion, the world has basically had a DLC expansion drop available to high enough level players. Aesthetically speaking, Graeldon is lovely. I adore these tribalistic areas that inhabit older ruins. When done right, they ground the town in the lore of the world and make it feel more natural. Plus, they've moved the town teleporter inside of the area with the Chaos Gate that's used to access the adventuring areas. This is a small but welcome change. Having to go through a loading screen to get into or out of the room with the Chaos Gate in Mak Anu was a pain. That said, Mak Anu also hasn't been made irrelevant. You'll still return here for various quests and to speak with specific NPCs. So, well done game for keeping older content relevant. That's more than can be said for World of Warcraft. Additionally, Haseo's Guild Kanat has had their home base moved to the new town, and with it the alchemy system receives an upgrade. Now you can use extra copies of equipment to upgrade armor and accessories as well, not just weapons anymore. Now, a new hub is nice, but that's just a place to hang out. What about how the game actually plays, how it feels? Well, for the first few hours, nothing much changes. After some adventuring and questing though, Haseo will go on a quest to unlock his second job extension, changing his outfit once again, this time to the one we recognise from the beginning of .hack Rebirth. And despite my best attempts, I cannot help but stare at that fat booty. Why, Bandai Namco? Why? It's an overall edgy and spiky design, reminiscent of the Final Fantasy Dragoon armour. Who looked at the amazing armour design and thought, this is missing something? Apparently, it needed a dump truck in the back to make it perfect. I digress. Along with the addition of butt jiggles, Haseo is now able to wield scythes, adding a third weapon to play with. Additionally, you can now assign multiple weapon skills to your quick menu, and using them will automatically change your weapon to the correct one for that skill. And if that wasn't enough, enemies will now have a weakness to specific weapon types, encouraging you to change your weapon to suit the situation. Overall, these are great changes to the combat mechanics and add in a lot of depth that was missing. It's a shame this isn't unlocked until you're several hours into the game. A couple of other aspects to the combat have also been upgraded. There's a new awakening ability called Divine Awakening. This ability makes use of the present but unused affection system from the first game. Interact with your friends by giving them gifts, going on adventures with them, or sending them cards in the mail, and their affection will increase, allowing you more time during the button mashing minigame and also the resulting damage it causes. The other upgrade is to Skaith, Haseo's avatar. He now has a cool new look and his melee combo has a fourth attack. That's it. That's literally all they changed. Considering how much of a narrative emphasis is placed on the importance of avatars, this is pretty disappointing. There are some new Ida enemies to fight against though, so that's a welcome change. Throughout the story, you will also fight against the other avatars, absorbing their power when you defeat them. Although that absorbed power is just a narrative device, not a tangible upgrade, sorry. On the combat side, the final change is the introduction of some new status effects like Paralysis and Charm, as well as matching items to add these effects to your weapons, or resistance to these effects to your armor. This is all explained in the actual in-game patch notes, which is a lovely in-universe touch. The other big change is that the devs remembered that every good JRPG needs a card battling minigame, so say hello to Crimson Versus. I won't go into too much detail, but it's basically an automated card battler. Build a deck consisting of one general and 3 supporting cards and then you're good to go. Battles would take place automatically while you're playing the main game, and you can return here to view your progress in between quests. Now, while it's a bit off topic, I find this fascinating. Obviously it's a reference to Triple Triad, the card game first introduced in Final Fantasy VIII, but it's even more fascinating because in .hack Reminisce it's an idle game. For those that don't know, the first idle game was Progress Quest, released in 2002, which was a parody of games like EverQuest. The idle genre didn't really kick off until the release of Cookie Clicker in 2013. With .hack Reminisce releasing in 2007, they were actually ahead of the curve by about 6 years, which is pretty impressive. From the admittedly brief searching I've done, I've not found many other games like this, so if you're looking for a niche genre to own, this might be something worth exploring. Anyway, I'm digressing yet again. Crimson Versus is a nice distraction, but from my experience with it, I didn't obtain any rewards outside of more cards to use in the minigame. That didn't stop me from checking in every time I returned to the in-game menu though. For better or worse, that's really all that's changed between .hack Rebirth and .hack Reminisce. So let's discuss the plot. Once again, it's the core focus of the game, and the pre-rendered cutscenes continue to be lovely. The voice acting has also improved somewhat as Sakaki's character takes a more central role and Crispin Freeman delivers an excellent performance. It's also good fun if you're a Naruto fan to hear Sasuke and Itachi arguing with each other, even though it's a totally different franchise. The game suffers from some pretty bad pacing issues though, often alternating between an actual plot point and a veiled excuse for a level grind. There are a handful of side quests to complete, most of which are replicas of the ones from the first game, and none of which really gave any substantial rewards. To summarize some of the key events in the game, Haseo teams up with the ex-emperor of the first tournament, Alcade, to fight through a second tournament arc. The current emperor is her guildmaster, and he has been possessed by Ida. In fact, Ida seems to be spreading between players, much like an infection or a plague. This is a really interesting concept and reminds me of the corrupted blood plague incident that took place in World of Warcraft in 2005. For those unaware, this was a pandemic-like event that was caused by a damage over time debuff that spreads to other players that was accidentally able to continue its effects after leaving the boss arena. This resulted in it spreading throughout the populated areas of the game, killing most players in 60 to 90 seconds. Researchers actually used this incident for modelling pandemic outbreaks and responses, and it even influenced our response to the COVID pandemic. Who knew that playing video games could be good for science? Given the timeline of events, I'm curious to know if the devs were aware of this incident and were influenced by it when creating the story for the .hack GU series. Maybe a fan will be able to let me know in the comments. Anyway, before the tournament arc can finish, Alcade is killed by Bordeaux, during which she tells Haseo not to cry, ruining an otherwise lovely scene with some toxic masculinity. Thanks, game. Alcade's character vanishes and she falls into a coma in the real world, just like Shino, Haseo's quote-unquote girlfriend, did. Anyway, plot happens, and eventually Sakaki manages to unleash Atali's avatar, which he then uses to go on a rampage, destroying the Moontree Guild. Haseo and team quickly put a stop to that, and Haseo attempts to cheer her up by slapping her in the face. Ultimately, it's revealed that an Ida-infected Ovan is the one who has been pulling the strings from behind the scenes, all with the goal of trying to make Haseo stronger. Everything culminates in a fight with Ovan that is actually pretty decently challenging. The threat of Ida is eliminated, but the Lost Ones are still comatose, so we're left wondering what that was all for. Credits roll, and in the post-credit scene, Haseo and Atali regroup at the Hulgrans Cathedral to discuss their next steps, only to be rudely interrupted by Ovan, once again being a third wheel in their budding relationship. And then we get the real credits. Bandai Namco had set themselves a tough challenge with this game, needing to create a sequel within a year of the first game releasing. Timelines that are so tight will always result in compromise in one way or another, and to this end I can understand why there are so many reused assets between the two games. However, it's clear that the devs used the time to tidy up and polish as many aspects of the series as possible. Many of the gameplay mechanics have either been improved, iterated on, or reworked completely. At the same time, the core elements, which are arguably the plot and the pre-rendered cutscenes, have been polished further and allowed to shine. Adding to all of this is the fact that .hack GU was designed to be a trilogy from the outset. In most trilogies, it's the first and third parts that usually have the most attention on them. The first to set the scene and pull in an audience, and the third to wrap up the narrative and create a satisfying conclusion. The middle part is always tricky because there's only so much you can do. You don't want the middle to have greater highs than the finale, and you can't wrap up too many plot threads or introduce too many new ones without ruining the pacing. At the same time, if you don't wrap up anything, you have to wonder what the whole point of it was. What's its justification for existing? That said, I think .hack.gu Reminisce manages to toe the line quite well, and has left me interested to see how the narrative will be wrapped up in the third and final part. Given that Reminisce released in May of 2007 and Redemption released a mere 4 months later in September 2007, I'm curious to see how much more they were able to improve the formula in that time. Reminisce has definitely elevated the core mechanics and the plot that was established in Rebirth, and for that, it certainly deserves credit. Ultimately though, it does suffer from pacing issues and needless grinds in between the story beats. The biggest reasons I can think of for this are to pad out the game time, and because they established in Rebirth that Haseo was around level 130-ish before his reset, and therefore needs to be able to reach close to that level by the end of the final game. Yes, the side quests now have a lot more variety to them, which is welcome, and they do add to the overall world building and sense of belonging in the game, but they also don't offer relevant enough rewards, at least as far as I saw, to encourage completing them outside of doing so for completionist's sake. All in all, I think Redemption is definitely a step up from Rebirth, but it's still ultimately a flawed game. So that's why my final rating for .hack//gu Reminisce is Divine Awakening out of 10. It's a flashy, fun, but unfortunately repetitive way to defeat enemies with the power of friendship. Welcome to the end of the video. A massive thank you to all the channel members on screen for supporting the channel, especially our 2 Knights of the Holy Grail, Freaky Feline and Loveheart Gonzi. If you'd like to become a member, you can do so for as little as $1 per month. Just click the join button to see the available membership levels and perks. Thank you for joining me on this weird gaming adventure through the depths of Steam, and I'll see you next time in part 3 of the .hack series. Until then, take care.